A man once said, if you want a good story, just ask any random person if there was ever an event in their life they cannot explain. Someone almost always has one weird thing that has happened to them. So Reddit, regardless of whatever you believe about the world, what's your story? I'm gonna make this as short as possible, but I was supposed to be flying out to Thailand from Australia. I was also kind of seeing this guy who was flying into Melbourne the same day I was leaving. He asked if I wanted to visit him and spend Xmas with him, but I was pretty set on going to Thailand for Xmas. Night before I was supposed to leave, I had the worst dream. I was standing on the beach and these huge waves just started coming for me. Ended up swallowing me and taking me away. I woke up in the worst sweat ever. Completely freaked me out. Never, ever had such a vivid dream. I can't even explain how real it felt. Anyway, I spoke to the guy the next morning and impulsively changed my ticket to go see him in Melbourne. Instead, the dream just gave me the creeps that bad. Turns out the Boxing Day tsunami hit right where I would have been staying. Probably a weird coincidence, but makes me think, oh, and I am married to that guy now. I regularly have dreams of my cat calling my name. Every time I wake up from one of these dreams, she is looking at me. Before anything creepy or profound could happen, the little shits start yowling for wet food. Once on my birthday, I was in the kitchen and was reading some schedule on the fridge when all of a sudden I heard the birthday song being whistled really nearby, like almost right behind me and very close to my right ear. I mindlessly began to hum along. Then it hit me. I was all alone at home and I had no fucking clue where, who, or what it came from. Even to this day, I ran out of my house and didn't come back for the rest of the day. Was sitting in my room reading a book, facing my open door. Saw my brother walk past into his bedroom next to mine. Heard him close the door. 30 seconds later, my dad comes up to my room, ashen-faced. "Where's your brother?" he asks me. "In his room," I answer without hesitation. "No, he's not." My dad continues to look absolutely horrified. "Your brother's not home." We check his room. It's empty. We both saw the same whatever it was walk into my brother's room. Still gives me goosebumps. Edit. For everyone asking, my brother was out with friends. He didn't come home for several hours. It was a second story with a straight drop down and hard to open windows. So no chance of a prank or window exit. We didn't tell my brother until we moved to a new house. My friend and I were laying on a trampoline looking up at the sky, watching the birds fly. Then I swear I saw a flying bunny. I asked her if she saw it too and she did. It was probably a predator-type bird carrying a bunny, but for the longest time I swore it was a flying bunny. When I was young, 6 to 8, not really sure, my parents had this apartment building they rent out near our house, and one of the tenants were a couple. The wife's parents were also our neighbors and they lived a block away from us. I used to play with the wife's younger brother and would hang out at the couple's apartment to play. It was around the couple's son's birthday and I think it was his first, because I remember they were making a big deal about it and talking about it for weeks. They were gonna hold it at the wife's parents' house. WHICJ wasn't that far from home, so I asked my parents if I could go. I remember them indirectly saying no, and I guess in a joking, teasing kind of way told me they were gonna serve ducks instead of chicken. I hated ducks as a kid. I remember clearly being really bummed out about it for days. A few days after the party, I was hanging out at the apartment and they were gushing about the party pictures that just got developed, film once, and I was like, I wish I was there. Then the wife was like, "What do you mean? You were? Look, here you are," and showed me the pictures and I was there. I'm sure I'm not remembering it wrong because it has been bothering me all this time. I remember asking my aunt if I went and she even said no, but my friend, the younger brother, told me I was there and we even played. I just don't remember attending that party at all. I actually asked my aunt about this recently and she doesn't remember. It was just weird. Edit. Spelling and details. There was one time me and my parents were house sitting for the neighbors feeding their dog and stuff. One time, while we were there, I was chilling in the living room and saw someone go up the stairs. I assumed it was my dad because he had a pair of black dress shoes on that was similar to the ones my dad wore to work. A minute later I go into the kitchen and my dad is in the room with my mom taking, and moreover he is wearing sandals. I have no idea who it was I saw because there was 100% no one else supposed to be in the house at that time. Nothing was stolen when the neighbors got back, so I doubt it was someone who broke in. A friend piped up in my dream remotely, like 30 kilometers away, and I yelled at him to go away. Later that day he rang the house phone. I'm old, and told me that he'd woken me from my dream. The words I'd used and exactly what I'd been dreaming. Couldn't ever explain that. Had an accident when I fell asleep driving. I went off the road when I reached AT. Headed straight into a wooded area going about 50 miles per hour. But ran into a telephone pole's guy wire. Heavy cable driven into the ground at a 45-degree angle to the pole. Well, that cable was a godsend because it absorbed most of my kinetic energy and significantly slowed me down. To give you an idea of how much energy it absorbed, it cut into the front end of my car about 2 feet, slicing the battery in half in the process. It also pivoted me around 90 degrees so I was sideways when I went down a hill into the woods. Rolled the car about 3 times and ended up on the roof. Completely missed all of the trees. I extracted myself from the crash, gathered my stuff and walked away from the accident completely unharmed. Was wearing my seatbelt. I walked home, which was about 2 miles. It was 2 a.m. and pre-cell phones. After I got home I noticed about midway on my right thigh, a perfect 1-inch square of fabric was gone from my khaki pants. I'm talking about a perfect square. The edges were so clean, like it was carefully carved out with a scalpel. No cuts or scrapes on the skin of my thigh. It was surreal and creeped me out. I believe that after I die, I will be presented with this 1-inch piece of khaki fabric and be told, it wasn't your time. When I went back to the scene the next day, the telephone pole guy wire had snapped, and the pole, while still standing, had been pulled so hard that where it went into the ground, the hole was elongated about 6 inches before it sprung back. No sign of the square of fabric. Edit. Changed inertia to kinetic energy. When I was about 14 or 15, I was in my first class of the morning. I got a call from a private number and I answered it. It was my mum saying in a stern voice. I said no. Tilde open chips tilde. I mean no. I was really confused by this because I hadn't done anything wrong. I was trying to explain to her that I was in class but she just kept speaking over the top of me. I gave my phone to my friend to show her and she was confused too. It sounded exactly like my mom's voice and she said my name. I texted my parents asking what I did wrong and they said they had no idea what I was talking about. Later that day I got off the school bus and started walking through my neighbor's field to get to my house when I got the exact same call as if it was a voice recording. My parents still say they have no idea what it was about. I asked my friend if she remembered the phone call to make sure I wasn't just imagining things in. She does. I lost a stupid arcade prize coin purse in elementary school. It was black and yellow with obnoxious smiley faces all over it. Brought it to school with me all the time. I don't know why, because I had no money in it. Once I lost it, it just vanished. I don't remember when I realized I had lost it, but it was gone, and I could not shut up about it. My school, by now turned to rubble I assume, used to have a gym on the top floor of the attached second building. Strange, right? It went special needs classes, library, and gym. This gym was always a lock though, and people hadn't used it for gym class in years. Of course, because of its looming presence above us. The fact that it was an abandoned attic, and that no one would allow the kids to see inside it. We called it the haunted gym. I think my teacher used a visit to the haunted gym as a reward for us one time. Because months after I had lost my coin purse, we were allowed to walk through it as a class in a single file line. I'm up front behind the teacher, following closely behind when I see a head in the corner of small yellow and black smiley face. I ran over to it, picked it up, and yeah, that was my coin purse. Somehow it had migrated to a locked and abandoned third-floor gym. Even my friend recognized it. Despite the teacher wanting to show us that it wasn't haunted, half the class left that day thinking that there was no way it couldn't be haunted. It stole my purse. I'll never fucking understand it. In Colorado, there's a place called Rocky Flats. https://en.m.wiki/wiki/rocky_flats_plant that made the plutonium cores for nukes back in the day. Theoretically, it's shut down now. It's just off a highway that runs between Golden and Boulder, which both have colleges. One night back in college, I'm driving that highway at about 2 a.m. It's dark and completely deserted except for me. But that's pretty normal at that time. I crest a hill near Rocky Flats and there are a shit ton of flashing lights surrounding a huge, slow-moving, flat truck-like thing with a big-ass covered bundle on it. We're talking something out of an alien UFO movie. This whole ensemble takes up most of the highway and is slowly moving towards me at maybe 5 miles per hour. I'm starting to freak out a bit because it's 2 a.m. and I had a crazy night and what the hell am I even seeing? When the loudest police warning horn I have ever heard got blasted at me along with a shit ton of high beams. I did a U-turn in the middle of the highway and floored it. I have no idea what the fuck they were moving and I don't want to know. Almost exactly a year ago, I was at a sports bar in the town I'd lived in for like 6 months, cheering on the Sharks halfway across the country from San Jose. I was seemingly the only person watching, and the only person in a Sharks jersey. The bar was U-shaped, and at one point I looked across to the other side at a guy who was ordering a beer. We caught eyes. He lifted his beer, mouthed "Go Sharks," and returned to his table near the back where he was sitting with a few other guys. By the end of the game, he had come to sit next to me and we were sharing French fries. It turns out he's from my hometown, not San Jose, which makes it crazier, and had moved to our middle-of-nowhere desert town under weirdly similar circumstances to my own on a weirdly similar timeline. Also turns out his younger brother and I have the same birthday and were born in the same hospital. He was 4 at the time, so he literally remembers being in the hospital while I was being born. He didn't go to my undergrad, but he visited frequently, party school, and was in the same frat my roommates and I were closest with. We have friends of friends in common, but never crossed paths. We must have just barely missed each other so many times in life, but didn't find each other till we were ready. It's insane. Sharks won that night and we have been together since. I went to the kitchen to grab an apple. I decided to slice it in the air, kind of like in Fruit Ninja. One half of the apple landed on the floor. The other just disappeared. I searched the entire kitchen and never found it. It's been like 7 years and I still haven't found it. If there had been an Area 51 raid, I'm sure they would have found my apple. When I was 6, my great-grandma passed away and myself, sister and mother went to her open casket and were saying goodbye. When we went to leave, the door was locked and we couldn't get out. We were stuck in a funeral home with our dead grandma. About 20 minutes later, the receptionist found us and let us out. She asked what we were doing and we said that we got locked in. She looked at us and said, "The door doesn't have a lock on it." Mom's convinced that great-grandma didn't want us to leave. A couple of years ago, my great-uncle passed away. After the funeral, maybe a day after IDK, A group of close family and I went out to dinner with my great-aunt that just lost her husband. While we were eating, she got a phone call and she looked up extremely pale, answered it and then hung up. It was from my great-uncle and no one was on the other side and his phone was at her house with no one home. Definitely freaked everyone at the table out. I clearly remember that when I was younger my brother and mother said our apartment was invaded when we weren't home. I even remember the posters around town showing pictures of the guys caught on camera. They had 2 X4s in case anyone was inside. Funny enough, I've reminded them both of this occasion and they say that they never said that. And our home was never burglarized. Think about it every once in a while but just dismiss it as a dream that I must have had when I was younger. I have a very unusual surname. On a flight home after a week away for work, chatting with a dude next to me, discussion comes around to plans for the weekend. He says he's heading out to the west of the state to check out a house his parents just bought. I mention that my family is originally from that area and drop some ideas for the weekend. Ask him exactly what town. When he says the name I say, well, my family was one of the founding families there in 1855. Quote, I ask him the name of the street, and he says the name, which was where my great-grandfather had built the first house. I asked him what he knew about the house. He says, well, it was actually built by one of the founding families. I think their name was de Girls or something. I just pull out my boarding pass and handed it to him. He reads out my name, de Girls. Holy fuck. We were both so ageless. When I was in the 3rd grade, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and seeing the silhouette of a woman standing in my door. She definitely wasn't my mom, and I just stared at her for a bit. A little scared but not scared enough to really do anything, lol. Eventually, I heard a voice in my head. That wasn't mine. The say, she won't hurt you. So I almost immediately went back to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I told my mom about what happened, and I guess earlier that morning before I was awake, both of my brothers said they saw the same woman at their door, but didn't hear the voice. We all physically described the same woman and she looked eerily similar to our great-grandmother that died before any of us were born. My mom was freaked out. My brothers and I just kind of thought, huh, that's weird, and didn't dwell too much on it, lol. Must have been 5th grade when I was sitting on the couch watching TV with my dad. As 10 p.m. rolled around, my dad fell asleep in his lazy boy, as is the nature of fathers. With my dad asleep, I figured I would watch a little more TV before I turned in. While sitting there I heard, and I remember this so vividly, a clown's laugh coming from the room behind me. I was petrified, but eventually mustered the courage to poke my dad awake and tell him what happened. I don't blame the guy for shrugging it off as my imagination. But here I am 10 years later and I still firmly believe my ears were not playing tricks on me that night. This isn't mine, but my grandma's and my mom's. I was a child, I'm guessing 5 or 6. We were on holiday in a coastal town in England and had gone to the beach. It was summer, but this is the UK, so it was one of those days that was warm enough to sit on the beach for a bit but not really warm enough to do the whole go in the sea sunbathing thing. So they were sat up watching me play in the sand and I set my mind to building a super big sandcastle. Being a kid, it was soon decided that I needed a moat for the castle. Cue me going backwards and forwards to the sea to get water and becoming gradually annoyed, perplexed that the water just kept soaking in. The beach wasn't busy. There were other family groups there. Some singular sunbathers but reasonably spaced out. Anyway, my grandma and my mum saw this one chap walk into the beach and immediately got vibes from him. They didn't know why. I mean, yeah, the guy was on his own, but that doesn't immediately make someone questionable. There were lots of lone swimmers doing their daily exercise, for example. But no, there was something unsettling about him. Despite him looking distinctly average, late 30s, early 40s, brown hair, light-skinned, of average weight and height, the only thing my grandma really picked up on was his piercing eyes. Whatever that means. Still, they had a feeling they couldn't explain. The man placed himself 6 meters or so away from me as I was pottering in the sand, and my mum and Grandma carried on chatting, but something in them told them to not take their eyes from this chap, who was sat on the sand picking up sand and letting it run through his fingers. After a while, he too started making a castle. At that point, something freaked my mum out enough to call me over and say we were leaving to do something else now. I was cross. I was very happy making my beautiful castle. The thing my mum couldn't shake was the feeling that the guy was trying to attract my attention by doing childlike activities. But she had nothing to go on and felt as though she was being paranoid. Anyway, the rest of our coastal holiday went by without issue. We didn't see him again. That is, until a week or two later when he'd been arrested. This guy's face was in the paper and on the news for abducting a young girl the same age as me. I've tried to Google it. This would have been early to mid-90s, and I can't find coverage, so I'm guessing the child was returned safely. I'll have to ask my grandma and see if she remembers exactly where it was, as I don't, and my mom passed away a year or so after this happened, so can't ask her. If I find an article, I'll update. Once, in Kenya, my girlfriend at the time and I were trying to get to sleep in a hotel. It was a super nice and modern hotel with good security and all that, so we felt pretty safe. But at some point during the night we both woke up at almost the exact same time and felt unsafe. Nothing had happened. Everything was normal. But we both immediately hugged each other and stared at the door. I've no clue what caused it. If we heard something and our subconscious woke us or something. Not hugely exciting, but it scared the shit out of me. I was at a football camp before 6th grade. It was probably around 6 or 7 in the evening, and I, being my attention deficit self, was staring up at the sky. All of a sudden I see 2 what looked like balls of light zoom by in the sky in the blink of an eye. They were parallel and made a 90-degree turn in mid-air. Their split-second, L-shaped, parallel turn high up in the clouds still baffle me to this day. I was homesick sometime during HS 11th or 12th grade. I was sitting in my computer chair playing Skyrim when my dog, who was usually content by himself and never one for affection, came into my room and lay down, staring out my door. Me being alone and this not being his normal course of action unnerved me a bit, so I closed my door and went back to playing. Not 3 minutes later I heard the voice of my mother calling my name. Clear as day. She's a school teacher, so she would have been at work. Shitting myself, I try to be as quiet as possible and lower my TV all the way down to make sure I didn't attract whatever I heard and could hear more clearly, only to hear the bedroom door upstairs slam shut. Sat in my room and notepad all day long in silence until my mom came home. I asked her if she was home earlier and denied it. One of the scariest moments of my life.
Posted this a few times and it remains with me to this day. When I was 21, a bunch of my friends and I did magic mushrooms together. While we were tripping balls, I had a very vivid hallucination. I was on a rocking chair sitting opposite 3 of my friends. As I rocked back, I saw them as if they were in their late 50s, gray hair and wrinkly, and as I rocked forward, I'd see them normal and young in that moment again. I realized after a few times back and forth that I wasn't seeing the third guy when I rocked back, meaning to say I didn't see the old version of him. I went on for about half an hour from various positions in the chair and I just couldn't wrap my head around it, and it weirded me out. Being weirded out on a mushroom trip isn't exactly a great feeling, so I obviously got a bit hysterical and passed out. I vaguely told the guys about it the next day and quite obviously, we all laughed it off. 8 months later, the friend I didn't see in that back and forth vision died in a motorcycle accident. This still makes me super uncomfortable, 8 years later.
I have told this before, but here it goes. My aunt had just rented a nice house by the beach for us to spend a vacation. I invited one of my friends, let's call her Elle, to spend a weekend there with me. We were teenagers. I was like 13 and she was 11, I think. So the day goes by and we're having fun in the pool when my mom comes and says that she had made hot dogs for dinner, and we get out of the pool. We enter the house, and while everyone is sitting at the table making their hot dogs, I decide to go to my room to do something. Don't remember what, so I go upstairs. Room was on the second floor, and I enter my bedroom. The design of the bedroom was like this. When you enter the bedroom, you can see the bed against the wall less than 1 meter from the door. And right by the side of the door was a giant-ass mirror. I enter the bedroom and feel something is off for some reason. So I sat at the bed and look around. Then my eyes went for the mirror by the door. In the mirror, watching me, was Elle sitting on the bed where I should have been. She was pouting her lip for some reason, and I looked at her for a good moment before running downstairs. That night I felt sick, had a fever, and vomited several times. Then the morning came by and I was healed. Again, this could have been my mind's playing tricks on me, but it felt real as fuck. TLDR. Saw my friend in the mirror where I should have been when she was in fact downstairs. Felt sick afterwards for the whole night. Long story sort of shortened. Went to a friend of a friend's house pretty far away from where I live. Slept the night there. Leave next day. Leave my favorite hat behind. They live pretty far away, so I just said goodbye to it and moved on. Skipped to 5 or 6 months later. Go to cousin's house who lives near me. Looking for cousin. He isn't home. Go to his room. Sitting in the center of his room is the same hat as mine that I left. Pick it up. Has my name inside of it just like the one I left behind. Ask Aunt if she knew about the hat. She didn't know how it got there. She said she cleaned his room earlier and didn't see it. No one else has been in the house that day after she cleaned his room. Take into consideration that these people whose house I left my hat at and my cousin and his family have never met or probably ever will. I asked my cousin about it when he came home and he didn't recognize the hat. Weirdest shit ever, and it still boggles me to this day. Edit. I left the hat in the room I was sleeping in and only remembered when I couldn't feel it on my head. And remembered I took it off before going to sleep. I told my mom and she said, "We are already halfway home. We are not turning around because of your own stupidity." We left momentarily after I woke up so no one could have grabbed my hat since I left the room and everyone was outside getting ready to leave. My girlfriend had a black stone heart ring she'd wear when I met her, but it would occasionally somehow fall off, despite being a tight fit, only to be found in odd places days later. Eventually she tied it on a leather strap and gave it to me to wear around my neck. It was a very tight fit over my head as it was a bit short. Was an effort to get it on or off, but we joked that at least I wouldn't lose it. One day we were packing up the family holiday home we'd sold 2 hours from home, and while loading furniture into the trailer I must have snapped the tight strap and lost it. We only realized halfway home. Searched the trailer as we unloaded, but no sign. We'd sold the holiday house so no one we knew could even go look for it, so we finally accepted this time it was lost for good. 2 years later my dad was mowing the lawn on the ride on it home, and he went to our paddock to empty it. He got off, emptied the clippings, but when he got back on and reached for the gear stick, something sharpish grated his grip. The ring was sitting balanced on the top of the gear stick. The leather string wound down the gear lever, but still intact, not snapped. He was alone in the middle of the paddock. We have no idea how it got there 2 years later, 150 kilometers from where it was lost. I asked my now wife where it came from originally. She found it in a kooky little pop-up shop of witchy-type things. It was the only ring there, and apparently it was also the only second-hand item they had for sale. The kicker here, I put it in my wooden box of special items so we'd never lose it again. I went to get it to show someone a few years ago and wasn't there anymore. I often have a random song in my head. When I come home and turn on the radio, it's the exact same song at the exact same part as where the song is in my head, seamlessly going from my head to the radio. This has happened way more often than it just being a coincidence, and I cannot explain why or how. Dead of winter in southern Maine. 2 a.m. in the morning, hear my doorbell go off. Cliché, I get up to check it. Turn on the floodlight. It's snowing but there's no prints. I go back to bed, it goes off again, but I hear my neighbor's voice. I get back up, check it, no prints, still nothing else. Go back to bed. Just starting to drift off. Tapping and breathing coming from my window. I tell me parents. They decide to check down the road anyway, thinking he might be running away even with no prints. Nothing on the road, no prints to signs of life, nothing. Wake up in the morning, check beside both my windows, no prints, no signs that anything had been there. Nothing. Next couple of days I wake up hearing what sounds like hoofbeats on the ground. No prints or nothing. Maybe unrelated. Summer following, I was out in the woods doing some bushcraft and weapon handling for airsoft. Hear a bunch of crashing in the woods, trees snapping, roaring. I start packing up, paying attention to the surrounding area. Start slowly walking back home, stopping, looking, listening and smelling. Nothing, but I hear what sounds like footsteps following me in the leaves a few feet to my left. Sprinted as soon as I saw the house, locked the doors. Went out the following day, no sign of snapped trees or limbs or anything else. No sign that I heard what I did. Parents still think I'm crazy, but I'm convinced there's something out in my woods.